Well, I am very excited to be here with all of you today. My name is Renee, and I'll give you a little bit of more information about me, but my talk today is called Undoing the Doing in a Do Crazy World. And it really is a lot of my own story of addiction, a certain type of addiction that maybe you haven't really named before, but it definitely hit me hard several years ago, and that is being a doing addict, someone who is just completely addicted to doing and the high of doing. And that ultimately resulted in me making a significant change about 5 years ago and leaving my corporate life and moving into starting my own coaching and consulting firm, where I could really do work that mattered most to my heart, but do that in a way that didn't sacrifice the whole of my life. So I know a lot of the attendees to the conference are younger, and I wish that someone would have offered me an alternative to my doing life 20 years ago. It would have changed a lot of things for me. That said, of course, being able to contribute in the world and take action is absolutely necessary, but what happens when you're taking action that isn't authentic, or it's too much action and it results in things health related, relational related, and that's when it becomes an addiction. So in terms of a little bit more about my background, I play at the intersection. I have my own coaching consulting firm, and I play at the intersection of business and psychology. And I did that internally, and I do that now as well. My career started in the 90s in the heart of Silicon Valley during the first big boom, the first big .com. And it was just an incredible time to be young and to be career oriented and to live in a part of the world that was so innovative and exciting. And so that sort of re-anchored me in my doing addiction and my working life. But if I'm being really honest, I've always been a doer in my college years and in my younger years. And in fact, I was raised by a couple doers in my life. So I'd say it's probably more of a family trait. Today, I do run my own practice, and I spend about 20% of my time working with women in leadership. My background, I have a master's in industrial organizational psychology, and I'm a certified professional coach. And maybe more interestingly, I've been married for 18 years, and I have a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old. And we love to travel. So we lived overseas for 5 years, and we've done over 50 countries together as a family. So I would say that is beyond something of a hobby and more of a ritual. Something else relevant about me, which I already shared, is I am a doing addict and an action junkie. I actually ended up a couple months ago taking my story to the TEDx stage. And what I'm going to share with you today pulls from that talk, but hopefully also gives you an opportunity to not just have seeds planted for an alternative to your own doing life, but to really consider the possibility that if we can understand our choices in terms of what we do and don't do, and we connect that to who we are, and we're committed to living authentically and to having a healthy, balanced life, that I give you an alternative to taking action on everything that comes in, that I really teach you a practice to slow down and to choose. And what really drives me more than anything right now is just a chance to really reduce human and organizational suffering. And so that's really the work that I do out in the bigger world. So this conference is for women and minorities and our allies who are deeply interested in discussing things that matter. And so my title of my talk is Authentic Inaction. Inaction being one word, and inaction, authentic inaction, being fairly counterintuitive. It's not necessarily a concept, this idea of authentically not taking action. Almost sounds silly in and of itself. Not just because it's unfamiliar, but because we are raised and we live in a world where action is honored, it's embraced, it's encouraged. And too much of it, though, is a bad thing, like too much of anything else. And so relative to our doing lives, this idea that there's actually another option, another alternative, another way up until now for engaging with our day-to-day life as it relates to taking action can definitely felt scary for me, but scary, risky, foreign for most anyone to take on. So I just want to say that out loud and acknowledge that as you consider your own doing life and whether or not it's healthy and authentic or not over the next 35 minutes, that I just offer you that it's a journey for me. I've been on this journey now a couple of years and I still catch myself. So it isn't something that you just decide to do and get really gifted at it. You got to work at it really hard. And I acknowledge that. And the reason that's important is because it's a prevalent addiction that's unhealthy. And I hope by the end of my talk, you'll see the relationship between taking action on things that aren't necessarily yours to do or that you don't even want to do, and living and therefore living an inauthentic life, a less fulfilling life, a less purposeful life. So what are some of the highlights? I'm going to explore first, maybe the first 10, 15 minutes, just what is the doing dilemma? Why is doing too much a form of addiction? And the impact that it has on our personal and our professional lives. I'll also share why it's so hard to stop doing. I've already started to give a little bit of a feel for that. And then what I've done, I sort of put my own hat on as I claimed my own addiction. I said, let me look around. And I got really curious and I saw doers all around me. And so I narrated at least 5. I have more, but there are kind of 5 core doers. And I'm going to describe those. And then I'll invite you to interact with me a little bit in terms of which doer do you resonate most and what is your own suffering about. And I will share some of mine. And then I'll present my practice, which is called Authentic Inaction, which is really the choice that sits between taking inauthentic action and taking authentic action. So it isn't just to go out in the world and take no action. That is absolutely not what I'm saying at all. But that there is a step in the middle that I think we miss. And so I'm going to bring that piece to life a little bit more. So just quickly, thank you. I can see all of you in the chat. And if I could just take a minute, just your name, where are you? Who do you work for, if that feels appropriate to share? And just one quick takeaway that you're looking for from the next half hour now. So I put mine below. I'm Renee. I live in Sacramento. I'm a coaching consultant. And I'd love to leave you thinking more about your doing life and how to take more authentic action in your life. So if you want to just quickly do a quick introduction, I will take a read in there. I'm in Sacramento. I see a fellow Californian. Hello. Portland, Oregon, Manchester, UK. My maiden name is Manchester. So I love that. Seattle, Pakistan, Austin, Texas. Another one from Austin. My favorite fun cities. Okay. And if you would real quick then, just what's a takeaway you're looking for? Do you want to feel energized? Are you intellectually curious? Are you a doing addict and you'd love to stop taking actions that you really don't want to take? Just real quick. Bring more balance into my life. I've spent too long doing too much. Oh, amen, girl. I hear you. Just love to hear more of the story. I hope there's some inspiration in that. I love the power of stories. So thanks for that. Thanks for your curiosity. And you want to figure out how to get unstuck. Yeah. Doing can be noise. It actually can keep us anchored in the spot we're in when we take the wrong action. So I really resonate with that. Okay. All right, here we go. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Okay. So let me start with a bit of my story. I mentioned my career, so I won't go back to that, but I've had an enriching career. And I could honestly say every role, every company I've worked at has enriched my life in ways that I never knew were possible in terms of work. So I feel blessed. And I was exhausted. So 5 years ago, I was so exhausted from working so much. I would say I'm a doing addict and a workaholic. And I'll tease those out a little bit because just because I quit the corporate life didn't mean that all of a sudden I wasn't at risk of my addiction. So in 2015, I went to a retreat, a women's retreat in Esalen, which is a retreat center on the coast of Big Sur. And I was sitting in a room, my daughter was there, she was 12, and we were at the closing session and we were sitting on pillows. If anyone's been to a retreat, you can probably feel me here, but we were sitting on pillows. And I remember walking into the room, choosing to sit on the outside. There was 2 circles. And the women were being invited into the circle and asked to share the impact that the weekend could have on their life. And I was watching and listening, but I didn't want to step into the circle. And that may sound small, like some small detail, so what? So don't step into the circle. But it was like this visceral pull on me, a voice, go, why are you here? Who are you if you don't step into the circle? Who are you if you're not contributing? But I didn't want to step in the circle. I wanted to sit and receive and listen and just observe. But I was so used to doing, and my daughter, by the way, had stepped in the circle by now about 5 times. And she was eyeing me from the other side of the room, looking for the mother that she knew, the one who does without exception. But in that moment, maybe for the first time so clearly, I heard a second voice. And that voice said, just sit, observe, receive. It wanted to give me permission to not do. And I continued to wrestle with these 2 voices. And I actually had to step outside the room. And I looked out at the Pacific Ocean and I thought, oh my goodness, how many times has this battle ensued in my life? How many times had I actually been completely and totally overly involved and even obsessed with taking action, with doing the next thing, chasing the next shiny penny, raising my hand, taking on a new project, taking a new class, going to dinner with friends, taking another trip, whatever it was. It had ruled most of my life. I, double majored. I had multiple jobs at once. I was that. I'm probably a lot like you, and I'm seeing in your comments a lot like you. And I'd realized this was a lifelong battle that also had been well modeled for me. I mean, my grandmother was a doer, my mother is a doer, and my now 13-year-old daughter, definitely a doer. And so this wasn't just a family trait, but it felt almost genetic. And I started to also think then in that moment, wow, imagine how much my doing life had influenced a doing life in others. I've been leading dozens and up to hundreds of people since I was 24 years old. And I modeled what it was to take action, to be a doer, to raise your hand, to say yes, to step into the circle. I modeled that my whole life. And I know without a doubt that I created suffering for other human beings that looked to me as if that was the way to do it. I know without a doubt, and I have to reconcile that for myself. And I knew I was doing it in my own family system as well. And so that mattered to me. And I think the other part worth mentioning is that I was at a point in my life, I had stepped out of my corporate life. I was moving into this other chapter. So I was ready to honor that quieter voice, the voice that I had told to basically be quiet, shut up, turn the volume down for so many years. I was in a place where I really could honor her. And in that honoring, I also really trusted at this point in my life that I had more choices than I thought I did, at least up until now. So that was my narrative, and it gives you just maybe a taste of why this was a big deal for me. So what was at risk for me? And I'm going to ask you to kind of share a little bit for you what sacrifices you're making if you resonate with this addiction. I was doing way too much, none of it as well as maybe I wanted, just maybe good enough. Some things I was overdoing. I didn't know the difference. I gave my power away to choose. Renee, would you like to do that? Sure, I'll do that. No, why did I do that? Why did I raise my hand once again to do that? The risk of being inauthentic. And I would say something about myself that I really honor in myself is authenticity and standing for who I am and that really being evident. And when I say yes, when my actions don't match who I am, I'm not being authentic. I mentioned that I was modeling behavior to my teams and to my family that wasn't healthy. Sometimes I wasn't able to say yes to the things I really wanted to do because I had said yes to too many things that I didn't want to do. So that was really tough. I was physically unhealthy. I've suffered from insomnia most of my life, but definitely I think the major culprit is my doing life. I mean, my monkey brain is not just thinking about, what's for dinner tomorrow. It was busy. And so I was exhausted, I was burnt out, and I was suffering from pretty bad insomnia. And I was at the beck and call of kind of the next shiny penny. And that's also maybe a personality overlay. I could get excited about a lot of things. I'm a grateful person, so I don't like to, not get the most out of everything. And so I, fun idea, fun thing to do, good idea, I would chase it. In fact, I became known for it. And so organizationally, at the time, I was leading a pretty large organization. Wasn't going to, with those behaviors and what I was modeling for others and expecting from others, going to be as effective and focused. And relationally, I was overcommitted and I had lost presence in my day-to-day life and in my day-to-day relationships. And so this was a big deal. So just if you would now take a second, because I like to feel my group, and since I can't hear you, what is one implication that you see in addition to this, or maybe that you've experienced yourself of being a doing addict? And that can be just doing, or overdoing, or overachieving. So I'm just going to take a look here. I have someone, thank you, Farah, who really shared that you actually suffered from real burnout, which is a real thing. Relationships, physical and mental health, eating disorders, absolutely. Just being able to balance all of the responsibilities and feeling good about those things. Anything else that you don't see on this list that really deserves some attention? Jumping in before you're ready, absolutely. Sure, let me say yes to that and let me get it to you tomorrow. And then you thought, they didn't even ask for it. Why did I put that pressure on myself? I really relate to that, Jessica. Anything else? Okay. Burnout, inability to make progress. Yep. Forgetting your purpose. I'm going to mention that. And that is a real thing. We lose touch with our truest sense of who we are in the world. A sense that I don't accomplish it, even if I'm tired and I've checked off a bunch of stuff, abandoning people for action. Oh, I'm getting teary-eyed. I relate to all of these. So, okay, we're in good company. I don't know if that's good news or bad news, but we're in the right session at least. All right. So here's the thing about being a doing addict. It's not just an individual challenge. There's also a real heavy and visceral and distinct societal and cultural overlay, which for anyone who works in an organization that maybe even has a doing culture, a overdoing culture, an over-efforting culture, we take a lot of pride. In fact, there's probably a lot of things in my life that wouldn't have happened that were good things. So I was proud of being a doer. And I know a lot of people who are proud of that. You may come from a long line of doers. It's well modeled. It's certainly a trait of most, if not all, of the contexts that I have lived in, whether it be corporate, whether it be education, whether it even be nonprofit and community-based organizations, friendships. We overdo those. We're busy all the time. And so, in terms of addressing the dilemma, the societal overlay, it really does require a willingness first to let go of a very strong bias for action that maybe doesn't just live in you, but actually lives in the energetic fields that you spend your days in. And for me, it was a dismantling of a systemic bias that I had actually contributed to for most of my life. I did my TED Talk and I had some sorority sisters from college reach out to me and said, oh my gosh, that you were known for that. You were the one, knew where all the events were, first one to raise your hand. And I thought, oh my goodness, I sure was. And I was pretty proud of that. And I'm not much different now. In this moment in time, different, yes, but still growing and still learning. So this is not easy. This is not easy. And for those of you that are starting now to think, wow, if I go back to my work and said, you know what, I don't really want to do that. And I hope that's okay. That may not land well. That you may be kind of first in line to raise your hand and say, I am not serving anyone by doing that. Or I am not serving anyone by taking on something before I finish this. Or I'm not serving anyone to claim what I really want to work on and what I really don't want to work on. So this may not be easy, but oh goodness, is it empowering. So what we do does get rewarded more than who we are. I mean, there are books on this. The art of being, right? Being versus doing. This is not a new concept in and of itself, that part of this dilemma. But this is what I'm naming as an addiction, is a crippling addiction with billions of dollars a year in healthcare costs, corporate burnout, wasted effort, and as some of you noted, has contributed to broken relationships and a loss of our truest sense of who we are in the world. And I just really believe this from the bottom of my soul, that while we absolutely make an impact on the world through our actions, our actions should be a natural extension of who we are. And instead, they've become, what we do has become the definition of who we are. And I am dedicated at this time in my life to break that mindset, to shift our thinking, to not only value action, but to value the benefits of inaction. Whether it be, I'm not ready yet, give me a little bit more time, as someone noted, or whether it's just, I don't want to do that. And I promise you, it's a win for me and a win for you. So I mentioned there are 5 types of doers. So if you have a pencil and pen, you can take a little note. Now, the good news and the bad news is that many of you might see yourself in multiple doers. I do. I could say all 5 of these live in me, but I have 1 or 2 that are my big, big culprits. So the first is the achieving doer. So the achieving doer does to be recognized. They do to be recognized and build up their sense of self. And they've likely always been acknowledged for their ability to get things done. And so what they achieve is directly connected to their self-worth. So that's the first one. And I relate very much to that. The avoiding doer. They do oftentimes kind of in that, to stay busy, sort of keep the bigger stuff back of mind. They're doing to kind of avoid being confronted with whatever might be more important, whether it's a task or it's a bigger question or a bigger challenge in life. And so they kind of do to stay busy and to keep those bigger, tougher questions and challenges of their life on the back burner. The third is the controlling doer. So they do, and maybe you're giggling, because they want it done and are often not willing to wait for someone else to do it. And so while that makes them feel more in control, that same control can push others away. So they end up feeling alone and unsupported. The fourth is the perfecting doer. So they do because they think, this is also one we might giggle at a little bit, but they think no one else can quite do it as well. And, their standards are high and often result in over-engineering and over-efforting. And yet, no matter how well something is done, it never quite feels good enough. And someone mentioned that. It's like, no matter how busy I was or how well I'm exhausted, it still never feels like enough. It's like reaching for a big breath that you can't fully take in. And then the fifth is the supporting doer. And these types of doers really do for others, and they're so good at it. Doing makes them feel needed, but also obligated. And when they do too much without asking for anything in return, they end up feeling unappreciated and resentful. So I would love if you would just quickly share, what type of doer do you most resonate with? And then one thing, if you haven't mentioned it, or mention it again, just that we can all follow together. Have you suffered as a result? So we have the achieving, the avoiding, the doing, the controlling, the achieving, the avoiding, the controlling, the perfecting, and the supporting. So let's see what we have. We have a supporting doer, burnout, a mix of achieving and supporting. Perfecting, the avoiding, missed opportunities for real growth. Yeah, absolutely. Relationship and health is severed by achieving, just being so committed to everything else but our own internal life. I really relate to that. Thank you for sharing that. Bad job choices. No fun at all. That's a tough one to get back out of. Self-sabotage. Yeah. Okay. All right. So as a follow-up to this, you can reach out to me. I put my website at the end, and I'll offer you a couple things. One is I'm actually creating a survey to help people identify the doers that will come with practices for each. So that's coming. But what is available is a 4-step guide, and I'm going to go through that shortly with you, and with some really thoughtful journaling questions for you to sort of take this now to the next level after our talk today. So let me just say that all doers share commitments, deadlines, events, things that they really authentically want to do, and others that we believe we have to do. And sometimes both might be true, yet we still have the freedom to choose whether we become action addicts, whether we have our doing life or it has us. So that's the bridge, that's the invitation as we move into now something, what I hope feels like practical enough to start this journey. All right, so I mentioned this practice called authentic inaction. And let me just spend a minute describing what it is and what it isn't. And then just to make sure I'm not misunderstood, this relationship between taking inauthentic action, pausing and taking inaction, which is authentic, and moving to authentic action. So authentic inaction is first and foremost a practice. It is a practice of slowing down, being with, and letting go of our bias towards action. It is found in those really small moments in our day-to-day lives where we can, and yet rarely do, make choices that connect who we are. And I saw that a couple people said that really connect who we are with what we do. Authentic inaction is not a choice between being and doing. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden I was a doer and now I'm just a beer. I'll just sort of sit and receive. It's not that. It is about bringing the two more into harmony. Who I am and what I do are aligned for a related and integrated purpose. And here's the part that may give you a little bit of a jolt, but it does allow us to choose a less productive life, a life that readily and healthily and realistically acknowledges the limits of our attention, our energy, and our time, which is not limitless. For most of us, it is not limitless. But in return, brings into sharper focus what it is we are truly meant to do. What it isn't is, it's not about standing still or doing nothing. My husband is a bit of a procrastinator, and we tease. I said, it doesn't give procrastinators an excuse to procrastinate. That is not what this is. It is about keeping things in motion, but allowing for more space and more fluidity, rather than that rigidity and that sort of like obligated type of momentum and action. That fluidity lives in between our actions so that we can continue to choose actions in our life that are genuine and authentic. So I mentioned you have inauthentic action, and one of the practices I have people do is, where am I taking authentic action? Where am I not? So what does that bucket for you look like? Then you get to the middle. You have a choice. You can take authentic action if you're that good at it, right? You know you're taking it. You know the difference. You can move right to it. Most of us can't do that. I couldn't do that. So I'm offering another alternative, which is this pause, this period of time. And I'm going to give you 4 steps as we close out the session, where it may be seconds, it may be months, but it's authentic inaction on a particular topic or activity or decision. It's giving yourself that space to pause, to lean into, to ask yourself, is this really what I want to do? So it can be the big things. Who do I want to marry? What job do I want to take? Where do I want to move next? Do I want to leave my company? Do I want to go out on my own, right? Those are big life questions. It can also be the little ones. Do I want to go to dinner with a friend tomorrow night or not? Do I want to sleep in instead of getting up early for a workout? So I want you to consider both the big and the small, because cumulatively, it's a tough word to say when you're being taped, they add up either way. Okay, so I'm going to offer you now 4 steps to taking more authentic inaction. The first step is really that moment, and I'm on the call here with a bunch of other doing addicts, so I think we're all there. It's simply about being aware. It's like that moment you wake up and you look at yourself in the mirror. Maybe it's with bags under your eyes and your hair hasn't been colored and it's awry and you're just not feeling great in your own skin. And you look yourself in the mirror and say, oh my God, I am an action junkie. I have put myself in this position, which I take full accountability for, at least in my own journey. And like other addictions, without that awareness and how it's playing out in our lives, we are powerless to change it. Again, no different than any other addiction. So that's step 1. Step 2 is the adoption of possibly 3 new beliefs. The first belief is that our addiction to doing is not healthy. It doesn't serve us, and it doesn't serve the people in our life that love us. The second is around the idea of authenticity, which most of the literature on authenticity talks about who you are, right? But it's not just about knowing, at least this concept being applied fully. It's not just about knowing who you are, but understanding how our actions reflect to others, reflect to the world who we are more vividly than anything else. So it isn't enough just to say, I am a thoughtful, present person. Our actions have to demonstrate that. And the third belief for me was the toughest, which is a rejection of the lie that says, do more. It is not yet enough. Do more. It is not yet enough. That is a lie. That is a lie to my fellow doers out there, fellow women, allies, anyone listening in. That is a lie. Who you are, what you have, and what you've done is already enough. That is your starting point. And I truly believe that for you. And I wish that for me to believe that for myself my whole life. And I wish that for you as well. Okay. So step 3 or 4 is sitting with this question. Who am I? And therefore, what am I to do? I say if we sit with this question long enough, and by that I mean sit with it in your daily life, for like a couple of weeks. Who am I? And therefore, what am I to do, right? It sounds very sort of philosophical, and that's okay, because maybe we can't answer that question yet. And that's a question that deserves to be answered, because no one else in the world is you. Your unique contribution to the world is yours to offer. And if we can't answer that question for ourselves, then sit with it a little bit longer. No harm. In fact, it can only be of service. And I have a practice, begin making a list, maybe 3 columns. What inspires me? What depletes me? What slowly sucks the soul out of my body? And look for themes. Look for the obvious, look for the outliers. Do you host a holiday dinner every year but don't enjoy it? Do you raise your hand, I'll take on that project, and you're like, what did I just do? Not only am I not the right one, I didn't even want to do it. I mentioned, do you wake up early to meet a friend for a workout when really what you want and need is to sleep in? So, when our own patterns and reasons for doing become clear, and we're fully committed to connecting who we are with what we do, when that moment, and they happen all day long, but when that moment arises for us to say yes or to say no, to do or not to do, we will make the right choice. Our action or inaction will be authentic. And the final step, step 4, is being willing to fall and choose again. I needed to accept. And so yes, but I'm going to speak for I right now. I need to accept that in many circumstances, I will not hear or listen to my more authentic voice. My familiar pattern of saying yes, even when I mean no, may win. And when it does, be willing to sit with that discomfort of putting myself again at risk of taking another action that doesn't line up with who I really am. And next time, choose again. And I do it less now than I did 2 or 3 years ago, but I still do it. And so I have a mantra: show up, fall, choose again, show up. And until you really feel confident enough that you're clear who you are and therefore what should you do, you have a good, compelling reason to shift whatever dynamic is at play for you today. And you feel empowered to make those choices for your life, to live a healthier and more productive life. So I mentioned my hope in my own life is to stay committed to my own recovery. And I have probably 10 places in my home, which is also where I work when I'm not in the field, to really who I am, what I have, and what I've done is already enough. Who I am, what I have, and what I've done is already enough. And my hope for you is that you find your purpose, that you find inspiration, that you find freedom and joy and ease and grace, and moving towards a life where authentic inaction is a practice that you honor, that you learn and demonstrate the value of both action and inaction, at least until the most authentic action that you could take in any given moment is clear. So that is my wish for you. And thank you. Thank you for choosing this session. Thank you for giving me your precious time, for sharing some of your stories with people that you don't know. So that's brave. And I honor that. And I love that. I have 2 websites. One is my main professional site. And then I've recently built up a site dedicated to this topic. And I have already pulled together over 100 resources, articles, books, journals, podcasts about this topic of doing addiction. And it's amazing when you really dedicate yourself to a topic, to a cause, how much actually, you're not alone in it. I have written also some literature on this, but I'm not alone in this journey. I meet doing addicts all the time. And so you're not alone in this journey. So please tap into those resources. And then my Instagram page is really dedicated to this journey. And I share a lot of information and stories and things that may also continue to support you. And I mentioned, if you go on either of my websites, just pop in your email address and I'll send you the free 4-step guide, which goes into each of the 4 steps in more detail and gives you lots of journal prompts to further inspire your thinking about this and the practical application to your life. So I'll close with a quote and then I'll scan to see if there's open questions. Being an action junkie is an addiction, and like other addictions, recovery is possible. When we begin to undo the doing in our own do crazy worlds, we will begin living a healthier and more authentic life. Thank you very much for being with me today. And if there's anyone that wants to stay on, we have a few more minutes. I will scan and see if there are questions to answer. How do you know you're overdoing yet I want to be completely involved? Yeah, Dorothy, thank you for that question. The truth is, your limits, and we don't all have the same capacities. So the first piece of work might be like, what is that? Ooh, I've gone too far. Another might be that you constantly over deliver, which means maybe 20%, maybe 100% more effort than is really necessary to deliver a quality outcome. So it's particularly if you're like a perfecting doer, it's shifting your idea of what quality looks like, a quality output. And I would say the biggest way is you're too tired. You're not inspired by it. It never feels enough, so that's how I would answer that, at least off the cuff right now, Dorothy. Yes, someone said, know your vision and values. I definitely suggest on my website as well, I have a values inventory that you can take. And that just is another sort of those guideposts, almost like a tent that will help keep you anchored on your purpose and what authentic action actually looks like. I love the reference to that. I'm hooked to this talk. Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. I'm hooked on this talk at this moment because you guys are really being generous with your comments. Is it available? Yes, it's being recorded. So thank you for that. And I'm glad you were able to relate. I'm glad and I'm not glad, but I see you and I support you. And I hope this has been helpful more than just in this moment. And great way to end the day. Thank you. It's been a great way for me as well. Thank you. Thank you. The last comment here, I have 1 minute left. I struggle the most with ethics, like work ethic, friend ethic, partnership ethic. I don't know how to let go even when it's too much. Oh, Vasilina, would you reach out to me? That's a big question. I think probably lots of people, I love the link to ethics because that's a mindset that we have around what it looks like to be a hard worker. And I come from a line of them. So thank you, I see you. But let's reach out and have a bigger conversation. But just to close on that, overworking is not a work ethic. It's not healthy. A good work ethic is knowing who you are, what you want to do, giving it the effort it deserves without sacrificing your own health and well-being. And that is what the world asks of us, and what I encourage you to go out into your organizations and community and model. Because as soon as more people start to do it, more people understand there's another option. And again, we're living a healthier and more authentic life. So thank you. All the best. Oh, the best 40 minutes of my day. Thank you. Thanks for that so much. Really, that is generous, and I'm very grateful for that. It's been my deepest pleasure, and best of luck, and I hope to hear from some of you.